Good morning and or good afternoon wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today on our Google Plus Hangout on the Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Forum. Today I am joined by Nana Darkoa, who is a women's rights activist, and I'm also joined by Josiah Aison, who is a social entrepreneur and is responsible for the creation of iSpace in Ghana. We'll be discussing today if Nelson Baani, who is a member of parliament from the northern region in Ghana, is a danger to Ghana. As many of you know who are watching today, he recently made some very disturbing comments on parliament floor and later on went to clarify those comments on radio and in national media concerning the treatment of adulterous women. And this was in relation to the interstate bill, which was being debated on parliament floor. And in those comments, he wanted to understand or know if there would be any provisions for punishing women who had been found to be unfaithful during their marriages. And the reason that this is disturbing is because he made no such query about what is to be done to men who are unfaithful, who, as many of us know, in Ghanaian society and African society as a whole, it's expected almost that men are going to be unfaithful in their marriages. So today we are going to discuss how his comments affect the country socially, how it affects us internationally in terms of the views that other people in the world might be looking at us at. And I'll just be asking Nana and Josh to give their input and how this affects us in terms, or it affects Ghana in terms of our attitudes on violence towards women and economically. So I'll start with Nana and asking you, how do you think that his views are indicative of Ghanaian attitudes on violence towards women, and tie that in with his views on adultery as well?
Thanks very much, Malaika. So part of the reason why this comment made by Nelson Baani really bothered me was the occasion as well on which it was made. It was made during a parliamentary discussion on the interstate succession bill, which is being looked at in order to ensure a fairer system, especially for women, because the current interstate succession bill ends up discriminating against women. A lot of people who live in Ghana may or may not be aware, but if, for example, a man dies without leaving a will, the law is really right now not very clear. Sometimes traditional laws prevail. Traditional laws depend on where people come from, and a lot of these traditional laws can be very discriminatory towards women. So you always have a situation where you have a woman being driven out of a home she has lived in, built with her husband, for example, and this leaves these women vulnerable. And so for an MP like Baani to introduce the idea of stoning a woman during such a discussion is indeed abhorrent. And I for one cannot believe that this conversation was allowed to take place in the first place, that straight away he was not shut up and told off. Because the message it sends is really very dangerous. It's saying women are a target. Anybody can accuse a woman of being an adulterer and be beaten. We know the propensity as societies have towards mob justice. I have written about this in the past, and yes, it's extremely disturbing. And I really don't know what else to say at this point in time, but it's disturbing, it's abhorrent. Yeah.
Josh, could you give us your summation and your views?
Right. I think I'm a bit opposite to Nana in the sense that I'm glad he made those comments, right? Because then it kind of shines light on the fact that Ghana is still stuck in that Stone Age mentality, because everybody's probably, those of us that travel back and forth in the country or able to interact in Accra or whatever the case may be, seem to think, yeah, freedom of speech, everything is great. We've moved on from the Stone Ages. But clearly, for an MP who's supposedly supposed to be smart and articulate and everything else, can come out with something like that, he's representing a group of people that still think like that. So I'm very happy that he brought that case to the Parliament for us to be able to discuss it in order for us to change that, right? And this whole thing about stoning women, and I think it's just from a masculine pride thing, right? So your wife cheats on you and you can't bear seeing her leave you with the other guy, so the best thing to do is just stone her to death. But then the question is, what happens to the man that she committed that particular crime or whatever the case may be with, right? We don't tend to address that. And I think when you look at it on just him saying, yeah, let's just stone women, I agree with you with the whole mob justice kind of mentality, because women being second-class citizens, I mean, anywhere you go in this world, it's not just, an African thing. It's just everywhere you go, you see that. Because recently we saw in the court of law where a woman just got, I think, 300 million or whatever from a divorce case that she had with her husband. But then it's because they have a system that works in this country to protect women in such situations. So I think comments like that, we shouldn't look at it from the negative. We should actually embrace it and say, good, that they still think like that, for people like us to be able to engage it and change it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, can I just jump in, Malaika?
Absolutely.
That makes sense to me as well, in the sense that it is good for us to know that these are the views of people and that we challenge it. What doesn't make sense to me is why a man like him should be voted into office. You understand? He should not be in office, because the dangerous thing about him is that he's a legislator. He is responsible for passing laws. If these are the kind of views he holds, what kind of laws is he going to pass? What kind of laws is he going to block from passing? That's the dangerous bit. You understand? And yes, you're right. It completely reflects a point of view of a certain group of society, and that needs to be weeded out. And maybe that's a point I did not make clearly enough. But we need to weed out elements like the Nelson Baanis of this world from the Ghanaian Parliament and from all positions of authority.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I totally agree with you 100%, because if he's in such a powerful positions to implement laws and he holds such views, that means that in the next election or whatever the case may be, we need to galvanize to get him out and bring in somebody that says the views that we have, right? Totally. Because, see, that's why I like the Western idea of democracy. Let a fool speak and they will show themselves. That's just the best way to do it, because to be elected, he can pretend to be anything else for us to elect the person. But once they're in power, they can say whatever they want to say. And I think all of this situation probably came about because they were looking at how inheritance laws or whatever the case may be. So then he's probably saying, what if, my wife cheats on me and then she goes, but then she might take half of my stuff with her. So it's coming from that, I would say that background of the man feeling like I earned everything and the wife cheats on me. It's a pride thing more than anything else. But, that stoning thing is a very, very dangerous ground to walk on, I guess.
Right, absolutely. And part of the problem is that he actually did say on Parliament floor that the interstate bill, as it was being debated, did not benefit him. He said, it does not benefit me. And his job as a parliamentarian is not there to have his own personal fiefdom and have laws that benefit him as an individual. Absolutely. I mean, people like this, elements like this, have to be weeded out of Parliament, because they do affect, like Nana said, and also as you said, Josh, they do affect the type of laws that we're going to see in Ghana. And they could be blocking laws, because he asked, before this interstate bill was amended, that we go to each of the regions and talk to each of the men in these regions, and even called on his fellow male parliamentarians to support him in this, because it doesn't benefit men. And as a parliamentarian, his job is to work for the benefit of men and women in Ghana, not just men. So that brought me to my next question. What do you think are the consequences of Parliament's tepid or non-response to this? Because we've seen a few people come out with statements. We've seen Oyelitha come out with a statement condemning him. The Muslim caucus in Parliament has distanced themselves, saying that this doesn't reflect them. And we've also got a Change.org petition out there that has gathered close to 9,000 signatures so far as of today. So people are clearly concerned about this. So I'll ask you, Josh, what do you think are the consequences of Parliament not really do anything about this and showing our society that they are serious about protecting the rights of women?
Yeah. Great question. I think it goes to mind that I think there's a saying, I don't know how, I'll paraphrase that silence to injustice is almost like support to it, right?
Yeah.
And this is what is happening. So that in itself, that as much as I can say, and I don't want to kind of put those people in parliament in a position that they probably do not agree with what it is that he said, but based on probably they want to win the next election or whatever, and they know that certain men in their constituencies probably have that kind of belief system, will not openly challenge that, right? So now it's on us as citizens to then challenge every single MP in our constituencies or whatever the case may be, and then ask them what they feel about it, rather than that particular individual, because that individual, we know what he thinks already. And it's very dangerous that people that represent Ghana as a whole will be silent on such matters. Because if it was a situation of, let's say, they were very vocal on the whole giving girls period pads when the whole education thing came up, everybody was talking, right? But then when it comes to a situation like this, you hear crickets, as we would say. It's just, no sound be made. See, so then does that mean that they support that or they don't? And if they don't, why didn't they say anything? And if they do, then we know what to do. But to me, I'll go out and say that their silence in itself shows that they support his view, as far as I'm concerned. Because if you didn't agree with it, you would say something.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
So I want to come back to the statement Baani made about this law does not benefit him. And he was being frank there, right? Because as the status quo stands, interstate succession laws, benefit men more than they benefit women. Okay. Right. So yes, the reality is people like Baani stand to lose out financially, which is their concern. Because I don't know the laws that sort of the traditional laws that govern his area. But for example, if they decide to go by traditional laws and it probably says women cannot inherit, and his brother, for example, dies, he probably gets to inherit everything, including his brother's wife. So that's what he means by it doesn't benefit him.
Right.
And that also makes me wonder, is that what the other men in parliament are also thinking? This bill would mean that I cannot inherit my brother when he dies. It's a reality. But
then is the question, though, to me, is the question, why are we still hung up on this whole traditional laws? If a country that we have a president, we have a Supreme Court, we have all of these things, and we're supposed to have laws, why are we following this traditional law? Shouldn't we be campaigning to get rid of these traditional laws and focus on laws that actually can be implemented across the board, right? See, so if you go and marry in a church, then this is what the law states, that a man and a woman, when they married, the woman will inherit the man, in the case of unfortunate situation happening, right? So shouldn't we be changing traditional way of thinking more than the individuals that we will be targeting? Because once we get rid of them, there's still going to be people in our society that still, think the way they think, because they still kind of caught up in that whole traditional way of doing things. So my problem being with too much of a traditionalist society rather than this so-called modern society that we think that we are.
Right, and I mean, I'd like to speak to that because I think that that's part of the problem is that Ghana isn't a religious society, and what MP Baani is suggesting is a portion of Sharia law. And if we're going to have Ghana is supposed to be a secular society, or at least our government is meant to be secular. So it's meant to be one size fits all. This is our standard of justice. This is what we adhere to. And we can't then have individual little pockets deciding what they're going to do in this case or another. And then there's something else that you mentioned before, Josh, talking about the crime of adultery. Adultery isn't a crime. It's, it's a sin. It's a moral affront, but it's not a crime as stated by Ghanaian law that is punishable by death, because Ghana isn't a caliphate. It isn't a theocracy. It's a democracy. And this is why it is absolutely important. And I don't think that Nelson Baani or other people that think like him whether they be in parliament or not, or just your average citizen, understand that Ghana is a democracy, and that we therefore cannot have within our legislative body laws that are governed by our religious preferences. Because what I would prefer as a Christian is definitely different than somebody would prefer as a Buddhist or a Muslim or an atheist. And that's why we have the umbrella of law to protect us, which is built on a certain system that is supposed to be predicated on fairness.
Right.
Completely agree with you, Malaika. And the other thing that we need to remember is that Ghana is a signatory to a number of international conventions, such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And what it means when we sign those conventions is that they become domesticated, which means those international conventions, our national laws now need to fit in, with the standard of those international conventions. So actually, we should be more governed in our treatment of women by CEDAW as opposed to what a traditional rule in some small corner of Ghana says.
Because I think, you see, this whole thing, is it down to the fact that, when, like, a man can have extramarital affairs and everything else, right? Because, then again, the baby goes somewhere else, right? But whereas a woman got pregnant, she will bring the baby to you. And correct me if I'm wrong, they say a woman always knows who the father of a child is, whereas the man believes whatever he's being told, right? See, so traditionally, you might have a situation where some women probably committed adultery, but then have babies and the men don't know about it, right? So it's more of a pride issue, because no man wants to sit there knowing fully well that my wife is sleeping with my next door neighbor. It's just not going to happen. See, so the best way to go about it is to eliminate that disgrace, quote unquote, is to woman, right? And that in itself is a very, very dangerous thing. So why don't we have a situation where the simplest thing you can do is just leave her, right? That's the simplest thing you do, just leave her. But then if you leave her, society also looks at you like, oh, that's the guy that his wife left him for another guy. So the best way to show your masculinity is to just murder her.
No, I mean, I think you're bringing up a very important issue, Josh, which is the issue of masculinity, right? And how men have been brought up societally to basically resolve problems they have with violence.
Right.
And this is an example of that, and it's a problem. I mean, from my perspective, we should look at children as everybody's responsibility. We have the saying about it takes a village to raise a child, right? The child belongs to everybody. They belong to the society. Right. I mean, personally, I'm not really bothered about who fathered the child or not. I have a friend who's a guy, and I was so impressed with him one time because he was like, well, if he's in a sexual relationship with a woman and she comes and tells him she's pregnant with his child, he's not going to question it because he knows he had intercourse with her. So regardless of whose biological child is, as far as he's concerned, he will raise the child like his. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting perspective. I'd never thought about it.
Yeah,
but
because he doesn't know.
Society. They belong to somebody. This is why in Ghana we say children are a gift. And amongst the accounts, traditionally, they were never really bothered about whose child it was, if you were pregnant, like they would like to know. But I mean, at the end of the day, the saying is that children are a blessing. Like they'll say the response when you've had a child will be, congratulations to all of us. Right. Because that's how we should see children.
But then, is it the case of because we don't know that the woman probably stepped outside of the home and that happened, right? So now that the men know, then they have that reaction towards it. Because again, like society teaches us for us to kind of react in a violent way when things like these happen, right? Because nobody's going to say, because anyway, if you let the woman go, you're constantly going to see her with the other guy. So imagine the pain that you going through every single day you see the woman, right? The disgrace that, quote unquote, you feeling as a man that another man took your woman away from you, right? See, so all of that comes into play. So that whole insecurity and everything else comes to play. So the best way to react against it is that, because it's easy. I mean, can you imagine most of our laws, quote unquote, traditional laws are being made by men, okay? So if we are sitting there discussing and a situation came about, oh, what would you do if your wife cheated on you? Oh, stone her. Oh, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, stoner. That's the law. We moved on from it. But if it was a woman there, that situation would probably never arise because we would have a proper democratical conversation around that, right? But because our laws are being made by men, it's easy for us to kind of just brush these things under the carpet and then say, yeah, just stone her, and then it actually becomes part of our belief system.
Right. And that's part of the problem, is this casual attitude of violence towards women that is so pervasive globally. Josh, you brought up, a scenario of what do you do when a woman steps out on you. We actually had something like this happen, a very public figure. It's, I think it was Neodate Lamte, I think he's a footballer. And something similar just happened with his wife. They were already divorced, and in those proceedings, it was discovered that, those were not his kids. Rule of law dictates that, she take her kids and she go. He's not required to pay child support for that. And that is the standard. If okay, shame on her, whatever. That was the choice she made, and it was, also his choice to believe that those were his kids. And some men would have gone out and asked for a DNA test every time a child was born. But that they handled it like adults. They went to court. It was painful, but at some point you have to get over the pain of it, and that comes with maturity. And my concern is that so many people have casual attitudes of violence towards women, and that is why we can have somebody like a member of parliament come to parliament floor and suggest that you hang or stone women because this is something they do in Afghanistan. And I think that's something that we need to work on, and I definitely appreciate Nana and her activism work in changing these sort of attitudes, because I don't believe that this is part of tradition, Armenian tradition as we know it. I think that these are ideas that came along with with religion, Christianity, and Islam. Because I have so many stories from great grand aunties and grandmothers, who have talked about casual relationships that men and women have had outside of marriage in our traditional settings. That are ancient, that predate imported religion. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. There is a concern that his comments, his sadistic comments, are a national security threat. Some people believe that, like Nana pointed out, that mob justice could and is often carried out, with women being accused of whatever, witchcraft, adultery, you name it. Do you believe that this does pose a national security threat to Ghana? Josh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, in that sense, if you put it like that, with this whole mob justice situation, yes, because all it takes is somebody to just drag their wife outside and say, yeah, she slap her 1, 2, 3 times, and other people will join in, right? And it's very, very dangerous, because again, we've seen it over and over where people have innocently been murdered for in this mob justice setting. So if something is not addressed in that situation, yes, it's a national security threat, because we don't want to see people just getting stoned because the husband just gets up in the morning and then decides that my wife cheated on me, so this is what I'm going to do. And you see, it's ironic that we're having this conversation about Ghana, but then recently, I think in the US, a rapper murdered a woman because he felt that she cheated on him, and he shot her to death and then killed himself.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like Josh pointed out, it's a global phenomenon. It's not Ghana specific. It's not Africa specific.
Yeah. It's a global thing. So we have to figure out what makes people do these things, as in to the point where, okay, somebody cheated on you. The easiest thing for you to do is to let the person go. But is it the fact that society, there's a darker part of society that will mock a person that got cheated on. So because of that disgrace that comes with it, the person then cannot handle the rejection, because 1, they're being rejected by their spouse, and then 2, they're going to also be mocked by society. See, so it's almost like a double whammy kind of thing. So what you do, so the best way is to react in the most violent way possible. Right? And so this rapper took on a personal justice, quote unquote, and murdered a girl. But then in our environment where we can have mob justice, where you can actually drag the woman out and society will help you murder the person.
Right.
It's a serious situation. And this is something that we have to campaign against, even across the board, not just for this particular situation, but just mob justice across the board. So that then we know that this a woman can never be killed because she cheated on her husband, or somebody can never be killed because they just yelled at us thieves or whatever, because it boils down to our police and our state laws not even being reactive, or should I say proactive on anything. Because if a man comes to you and said, okay, my wife cheated on me, the law's looking at you like, so what do you expect me to do?
Right.
Right? See, so there's no law for that, like you said, because it's not a crime. And because it's not a crime, what do you expect the law to do, right? So the best thing to do is just, okay, you want to divorce the person, then that's when the law comes in. But if we have a system of when it says that if there's a particular case of somebody murdering a woman because of adultery or whatever, and the person goes to jail, right, then I believe that it will stop people from doing these things. But if we don't have cases of people being, prosecuted for all of these things, then it's free for all. We can just do it and wiggle our way around it using traditional means and bribing police and whatever to make sure the case goes away. Because if 10 people stone her, who are you going to prosecute?
Nana, you recently wrote an article on This Is Africa on the Nelson Baani subject, and you actually pointed out in your introduction that you were one of these women that would be a candidate for stoning if what he said.
Well, thanks for bringing that up on the Hangouts as well.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ghanaian society is very hypocritical where men and women's sexual behavior is concerned. A woman's sexuality is always judged and man is never judged. In Ghanaian society, men can marry, several wives. They can marry in the church, marry traditionally. Men can have girlfriends, they can have mistresses. But if you as a woman, you dare to step out of what society considers to be the norm for a woman, all of that criticism comes to you. And that's basically the point I was trying to illustrate, that Nelson Baani is talking about real people here, talking about real women who can be killed because of his idea of, oh, I have seen this happen in Afghanistan and I think it's a great idea. Nonsense. These are real people's lives you're joking with. These are not mysterious, entities out there. They're human beings like you and I. So that's really what I was trying to do in the article. Say, you know what? This is personal. It's personal. It's not vague. It's not out there. It's real.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I also want to ask, you're both entrepreneurs. Nana, you are are you the brand marketer? I don't know. You're the woman above all at Maxi Clothing. And then Josh, you're you're the brainchild behind iSpace. And as entrepreneurs and as business people, what is your view on how this sort of attitude in a legislative body, number one, how does that affect Ghana economically? Do you think that has any sort of effect on, perception or our economic development? Just talking personally and just in general as well. Now, let me start with you.
In general, the high rate of violence against women in Ghana affects our economy. When women are being assaulted, they cannot work. When women are being assaulted and prevented from rising to high positions within the office, within government bodies, they're not able to contribute equally to the society. And just that on its own affects our economy. If you have a good proportion of your economy, and we know that the Ghanaian economy is run by market women, if you have market women who are suffering from violence, what kind of effect is that going to have on our economy? It's going to have a huge impact. It's going to have a negative impact. And it's an issue when you have women concerned about being able to, if you're in the corporate world, for example, you might have meetings after work. You might need to go for networking events after work. If you're concerned for your safety, how are you going to be able to participate in all of that? If you're concerned that when you get home late, your husband is going to assault you, how are you going to be able to work effectively? All of this has an impact on our economy. So for me, the issue that I'm most concerned about is the right of the woman, to live in peace and to live in dignity and to live a healthy life. The people who also like to look at things from the sort of economic point of view, whatever the case, that violence against women doesn't make sense. It's something that we need to all work together to bring an end to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I support Nana 100% on that because again, if we live in an environment of sorry, my boss, as in my wife, is just knocking on the door. Can I just open for her real quick?
Yeah.
One second.
That's too funny.
He's so funny.
Oh dear. Yeah. Do you want to ask me something else in the meantime? So there isn't dead air.
I do want to ask you something else. So I want to know.
I'm back.
Oh, Josh is back.
Oh,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, we need to have a situation where the women can be able to earn their own money and do their own thing, I guess. So yeah, so by not having that, it definitely does affect the economy because again, we can't just survive on just the masculine side of the boardroom corporate world type of thing because like you rightly said, I'll probably say 60% of the GDP will be from market women. And I dare anybody to try and give me facts that challenge that in that sense because excluding all the multinationals, if you look at Ghana as a whole, when you go to the Mokola and all those other people, it's generally women that are running the show. So like you rightly put, if the women are being beaten at home, they cannot come to market with bruises. So if they don't come and earn money, then what happens? See, so that's something that violence against women will definitely affect our economy if we do not look at this and address it properly.
Right. We have a question on the Hangout, and a user wants to know what media pressure in Ghana has been applied to get Nelson Baani to recant.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I feel like the media really reported the story, but I don't think they were putting pressure on him to recant. They were reporting the story, mainly, in my opinion, from a sort of sensationalist point of view. But actually, what was good about the report was that generally public opinion was like, he's crazy. So for me, that was the one positive thing, that nobody that I heard was sort of really agreeing with him. Everybody was like, this man is crazy. How about the men? How about the men? Which is what people kept bringing up. Because everybody knows how permissive our society is of men's sexual behavior. So what for me was good was that there was really good media coverage. And then the media also played the audio so people could hear for themselves, because it's very easy for people to deny. But right now, when there's audio evidence, people cannot deny. So this is why Baani had to come back and try and say, oh, I'm trying to explain what I said, and I didn't mean the whole thing, and I didn't mean this, which is really rubbish. So there wasn't media pressure for him to recant his statement, but the media did give good coverage to what he said.
Right.
I think they should have pressurized him to resign, because I'm sure if this would have happened in the UK or the US, he would have definitely resigned. I can guarantee you that.
No, totally. But for me, this is where we need a stronger movement of activists, okay? Because the media are only going to report what has been said. They are not going to put pressure. That pressure needs to come from activists.
Exactly.
And I feel like in Ghana, we need a stronger movement for social justice, a movement of both women and men who really push for fairness and equity in the society. And I feel like at this point in time, that movement doesn't really exist.
Right.
We have smaller movements that come together on particular issues, but it's not very easy to mobilize a movement of people to mobilize for an issue like this.
I do want to say, in terms of the media putting pressure, that bloggers have been very instrumental in keeping this in the limelight. Sway Kid wrote a really good article about Baani's comments, and said that it's important that we don't leave this fight to the feminists, because this isn't just a women's issue. This is a human
issue. Right.
And Becca also wrote an open letter asking Becca, the singer, asking Baani to resign, and said that she would be relentless in making sure that he resigned. So this is something that cuts across all economic swathes, both genders. It's a really huge concern, and I'm really saddened, honestly, that we haven't heard more parliamentarians and people, in government power speak out about this. And I guess just hoping that, in the hoopla in the Christmas season, that we're all going to forget about this, because we still have this cancer that is in our legislative body, and that is really concerning for me. So I hope that this answers the question from our viewer about what media pressure has been on this. And then Also, I wanted to ask both of you, because we're about to wrap up, why this issue is important to you personally. What makes this a big deal? Why is this something that we should not let go? Why are you on the Hangout today discussing this? And Josh, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Well, I was pretty much brought up by women because, dad was not around, not through a fault of his own, but so I was brought up by women, and I saw the struggle that they went through bringing up kids by themselves and everything else. See, so I will really think to myself, if a situation happened where my dad came back or my granddad came back and said, oh, my grandma cheated on him, so they're going to stone her to death, what would have happened to the family unit that she was, the head of? And as a father of two girls as well, I don't want a situation where a man will feel like he can abuse my daughter anyhow, just based on the fact that you felt like she cheated on you or whatever, because I will murder you if you do that. I mean, let's put it out there. So as a father of two girls and a male being brought up by women predominantly, that's one of the reasons why I think something has to be done, because it's not really, the system is not, inheritance system is really not fair anyway. And so for men to feel like, I can just get up and kill my wife because she cheated on me, and openly just say it like that without people just bat an eyelid and think, oh yeah, that's cool. No, it doesn't work. So we have to do something about it. See, so yeah, that's my reason.
Nana, why is it important to you?
It's important to me because, first of all, I'm a feminist, so I do my best to advocate for women's rights in whichever space I find myself. And violence against women is one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest threats that women face. It affects women, all women. We know that globally the statistics are something around the average of 1 in 4 women will be affected by violence sometime in her life, which is a scary statistic. A lot of the violence against women results in death. Right. A lot of the violence against women comes from intimate family members, from husbands, fathers, brothers. So for me, knowing that fact, and to hear that a legislator actually said this, was actually advocating for violence against women to be made a law, more or less, or to be embedded into law, was just really, really scary and retrogressive. And that's why I'm concerned about it. And that's why, in whatever way I can, I'd advocate for Baani to resign. But for me, even better than him resigning would be for his party to sack him, because that would be sending a strong message out. But I can see that's what basically the group of legislators hope will happen, is that we'll all forget about it and they carry on and have a Merry Christmas, right. And they go back to riding about in their 4x4s and passing laws that benefits them and not benefits the whole of society. Right.
And for me, the reason that this is important to me, and it's an absolutely selfish reason, is because I don't want Ghana to be Kenya, and I don't want Ghana to become South Africa. I don't want us to ever get to the point where we are so permissive and casual about, how we treat women and children, or, people who don't fit into a particular power structure, transgendered people, whatever. And it's okay to act violently towards them. I don't want us to ever get to the point where, men feel that they have the right to strip women in the streets like they're doing in Kenya. And so now we have to have this cadre of activists, doing my dress, my choice. I never want Ghana to get to that point. And I think that it is so important, like Nana was saying, for his party to sack him. They must absolutely sack him and send a strong message that this isn't the progressive Ghana that, we tout to the world. Every time the president jumps on the plane, that's the draw. The draw is, invest in Ghana. We're progressive. We're moving forward. We're ready to compete on the global market. But you can't say that and at the same time allow somebody that has these attitudes be within the legislative party. And I know that the way our government works, Muhammad can't really address that. He could say something about it, but it's not within his power to sack somebody like Nelson Baani. That has to come from the Speaker of Parliament and that body itself. That's not part of his executive.
Doesn't he have the power to do that? Isn't he president?
Well, from what I understand, he cannot sack anybody who has been elected.
But he can sack Victoria for saying that she wanted to make. Come on.
I mean, yeah, no. I mean, of course.
It's a question.
make a very good point. Go ahead. I want you to finish that.
Right, I'm just saying. So if he can sack her for just making a comment about she wants to make $1 million before she leaves, which to me, I don't see the crime in that because everybody has their own target or whatever. So he can fire her, but he cannot fire him for pretty much making a violent threat to 50% of the population.
Right. Well, he's an elected official,
right.
And she was appointed, unfortunately. But because he was elected, the government, the president doesn't have the power to sack him, from what I understand. But
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does because a CEO, he's just a CEO of the Ghana Corporation, right? And you can fire anybody that you want to fire because if people agree that the guy needs to go, you, the president, needs to make the case that, listen, the guy needs to go, and you will get a support for it. Maybe that's the reason why we have the situation that we have, because a lot of elected people are not doing their jobs, and they know they cannot be fired, hence why they're doing what they're doing. So maybe we need to empower the president to be able to fire somebody that steps out of line, whether elected or not elected.
And, well, actually, we have a question here. Has President Mahama spoken out about this comment from a member of his parliament? If not, has there been any pressure applied to him to say something condemning the comment? I haven't heard anything from the president.
Neither have I.
I mean, it's been crickets.
Yeah.
Neither have I. Yeah.
You know, and as much as we like to talk about Barack Obama and how he shouldn't discuss race and things like that, surely this is something that President Mahama should have, a statement about, a soundbite. But he has said absolutely nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really problematic.
Yeah.
So, well, this is our hangout. I want to thank you both for taking time out of your day to discuss this really important topic. I don't think that this is one that's going to just disappear from the eye of the public. Particularly knowing that there are other people who hold these views. As a society, traditionally, the way we view women and the way we treat women. And now we have someone in Parliament who is willing to even go on radio to clarify his point, to say in depth exactly what he meant, and to express his sadistic views even further. Does either of you have any closing thoughts?
I think. Go ahead, Josh.
No. I'll give you that honor.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right, thanks. So I think what I want to say is that I just want to encourage Ghanaians especially to be bold in expressing their views, to get involved in social justice. If there's something that's happening that's not fair, take a stand, make a point, find out what you can do, find out if there are NGOs who work in that area that you can support. If you can write an article about it, write an article about it. If you can do a hangout, do a hangout. I think as a society, we just need to be way more politicized than we currently are. So that's basically what I want to say to close.
All right, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I support what Nana just said. We need to organize and shouldn't really make this a feminist leadership thing, because once you do, a lot of people will just kind of back away from it because they will see it as, oh, that's just a feminist thing again. And so the best way is to kind of make it an inclusive organization kind of thing. So we need to organize as a nation when it comes to such matters for us to be able to address it, because we shouldn't just leave it to just a particular group of people because it's easier to say, okay, well, because they're feminist, so they'll feel that way about it and then sweep it under the carpet, right? But then if men and other non-feminist groups get into it, then they will see that it's a serious issue to address. So I think we need to kind of get all those organizations under one umbrella, so to speak.
And just to say, feminists can be men too, Josh. So, feminists do not try and exclude men.
Because feminist rights are human rights. Isn't that right, Nana?
Exactly. Yeah. Women's rights are human rights. Yes. We should all be concerned about women's rights.
Yeah. I'm working on my feminism, so.
Yeah. You're doing well. I'm impressed.
All right, thank you both, and thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for your comments and your tweets, and we will definitely keep this discussion going. Have a great day.
Thank you, Malaika.
Thank you.